It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our fourth speaker at this afternoon's seminar, and that's Dr. Bryce Fraser. Dr. Bryce Fraser is a renowned citizen soldier. He had about 28 years service in the CMF and Army Reserve, including active service in South Vietnam. He enlisted as a private soldier and he commanded every level up to including brigade level. He had a long life history, has a long life history in military history, and in 2013 he was awarded a PhD in history from the University of Wollongong on the subject of training citizen soldiers to achieve combat effectiveness. So would you please welcome this afternoon Dr. Bryce Fraser, who will talk on the extended war, 1918 to 1925. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The late left-wing historian Eric Hobsbawm, in The Age of Extremes, 1914-1991, coined the term the short 20th century. From his perspective, it described the period from 1914 to 1991. He was very conscious of the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the USSR in that year. He decided that that was the end of the period of conflict that had started on the 4th of August 1914. I don't think he's right, and he probably, if he was still alive, might agree. Because most of the issues of the conflict, as we've already seen, or many of them, still resonate today. Some of the places are very familiar and some of the events are very much the same. I will seek to give insight into selected events at the end of the First War up to 1925, which reflected Australian participation, but I'll also show the context, at least to a limited degree, in which they occurred. But we must remember, for the sake of Eric Hobsbawm's thesis, that far from there being a peace in 1991, the Balkans fell apart soon after that and reverted to place names that most of us remembered from studying history in high school years before. A place called, we used to pronounce it Sarajevo, for example, became somewhat infamous in its day. We also should remember the Ukraine in 2013 and ongoing, now a separate country. That will come up in this talk. And we might reflect that the MH17 was shot down in July 2014 over the disputed eastern edge of Ukraine. So much goes on today as was going on in the period immediately after the First War, and probably before that. My assigned brief is to cover the participation of Australian soldiers in the Russian Civil War, in particular their operations in North Russia and the Trans-Caucasus, or the Southern Caucasus, as they're sometimes called. This is the region northeast of Mosul towards the Caspian Sea, and I'll put a map up in a moment. Interestingly, looking with an eye to the future, the Trans-Caucasus is a region on the ancient Silk Road to China, or if you will, it's on modern China's Belt and Road Initiative to the west. So I'm not sure that the region we're talking about is going to be all that calm for the next 100 years. Before we commence the talk proper, I'll run through a few slides that just orient you on the map. This is good infantry stuff. You wave your arms around and point to the hill. So I'll do just a bit of that because I had to do it to understand the problem. And unless you're extremely good at geography, you probably will need it. That's a map of Europe that just reaches across from Ireland, if you will, across through Turkey, Syria and Iraq. And the area of North Russia is invisible on that map. The area of Trans-Caucasus is down in that area there, where the pointer is pointing. That's the Trans-Caucasus. A lot of the names in that area are not detailed here, and of course they've changed. This is a rather money map, the only one I could get. This has superimposed Russia on top of the map of Australia. The map of Australia is, Europe on top of the map of Australia. It's light green, Australia is light green, and Europe is a darker colour. It's dark green when it's not within the confines of Australia, and dark beyond. You can see the British Isles out here, that's Iceland. And up here, on what is effectively for us the tip of Arnhem Land, is North Russia, the city of Murmansk. And then as we move around, you can see Russia as a big inlet where Archangel is and extends northwards. It continues all the way down. This is Greece. And if the Caucasus were on this map, they'd be somewhere between Tasmania and the southern tip of New Zealand. And I found it particularly difficult to grasp the size of things. I know probably the German army understood this better because they fought over that terrain in East Europe quite often, but you deal in many hundreds of kilometres or thousands of kilometres without blinking an eye. This is North Russia, and the part that will concern us is up here, Murmansk, where there was a North Russian expedition, and Archangelsk, as the Russians pronounce it. The significance of those places is they're not that far from Moscow or St. Petersburg. Murmansk is a warm water port, well, warmish. Ships are able to use it all year round, whereas down in the White Sea, it freezes over. It figured again in the Second World War, you will know. So that's North Russia. This is a somewhat distorted map, but it does link at least Murmansk at the top left with the Caucasus down there at the bottom. And you, as I said, picture Arnhem Land to somewhere in the southern tip of New Zealand is the distance we're talking about, a vast area. Siberia, which comes up in this talk, starts technically there at the Ural Mountains. That's considered the geographic boundary of the between Siberia and mainland Russia, main Russia. This is the Caucasus satellite photograph. It shows us a mountain range covered in snow most of the year. This is the Black Sea. This is the Caspian Sea. It's narrow-throated. Down here we have Turkey. Over there we have a miscellaneous group of nations which we'll come to. And below the map we have Persia, or Iran as it now is. You can see what a natural barrier it is, but Russia's ambition, as was always, to be on the south side of it, hence the word Trans-Caucasus or Southern Caucasus. If we look at a map of that area, you can see that up there we have now a place called Georgia, and we have disputed areas between the Russians and the rest about how much land over the Caucasus you get. The rest of the detail doesn't matter much, but it does make an important point. Strategically, the British were very worried that anyone who crossed and came through the South Caucasus would end up on the road to India, or actually Pakistan, that is usually described as India in most things, because Pakistan is now the region that runs up there and separates Iran from India, strictly so-called, although very narrowly. Afghanistan, of course, is part of the mix, still a very contested area. So that was a strategic issue for the British. Looking at the immediate area of the Southern Caucasus, the present countries there are of interest, but they've only emerged into our knowledge in recent times. I just think we thought that was all the Soviet Union, and that was that. But the places to know about are now independent, more or less democratic, some countries, republics between the Greater Caucasus Mountains and the Lesser Caucasus Mountains. And you can see Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, a little patch of Armenia, we'll come to that later, within the boundaries of Azerbaijan, and a very significant set of countries that have recently struggled with their boundaries and their independence. It's worth commenting, just as a generality, that boundaries, strictly so-called, it's national boundaries in law, and alignments of ethnic groupings in this part of the world do not coincide, are quite fluid, and have been much contested, even in small ways, as well as wars. Crossing that area that I just had on the previous map is a red line which represents the the railway line from Batumi on the immediate left of the Black Sea there, just above the red line, outside of Turkey. Going the wrong way. It's Batumi there, over here. Goes to a place called Tbilisi or Tiflis in the middle and comes out at Baku on the Black Sea. That's just in the Trans-Caucasus, just across the mountains. And that is a critical route across that gap. Why is it critical? In 1884, at Baku on the Black Sea, the world's biggest oil area was discovered for the first time. Massive complex of oil wells which were greater than anyone else's in the world until well into the 20th century. It became immensely rich. It was disputed therefore by everybody who wanted a share of that. And that becomes a strategically significant route. It's a rubber line, a road and a pipeline. Get that one. Get that one. Black. Right, let's leave that for a moment. Let's go back to 1917 because some of this starts in 1917 rather than the armistice of 1918. Picture the situation in 1917. In October 1917, the Battle of Passchendaele was not over. It still had a month to run and flounder in the mud before they just got onto the ridge. Despite the introduction of convoys, 300,000 tonnes of shipping was being lost in the Atlantic every month. In Palestine, the Third Battle of Gaza was just underway, so Allenby hadn't even entered the country we now know as Israel in this period at that point. And Bolshevik Russia emerged after a revolution by relatively democratic people in Russia. Bolshevik Russia in October 1917 became a reality when the Bolsheviks overthrew the previous government that had overthrown the Tsar. The two Russian revolutions, most people didn't know about the communist one, but there had been one going on in that period. The October Revolution was not entirely supported within Russia, so a group of opponents survived called White Russians. That doesn't describe the colour of the skin, it's not a skin colour, they were a gregarious mix of people broadly opposed to the Leninist Bolshevik government. In the confusion of Russian politics, the Germans waded in and they commenced invasions of southern Russia and separated the Ukraine. They also captured islands in the Baltic Sea and were pushing up through the Baltic provinces towards St. Petersburg. So the perspective of the Allies at the end of 1917 was fairly grim. That is to say, the Western Front was preoccupying them, and the only good news they got was the Allied capture of Jerusalem in December that year. The Russians signed a separate peace with Germany on the 3rd of March 1918. Now let's look at that. Another date there, right? That's the period when the British were worried on the Western Front about a German assault, which you would loosely recall occurred in March 1918, sometimes called the Kaiser's Battle, and the Western Front was massively wound back by the Germans. The separate peace, known as the Peace of Brest-Litovsk, redrew the boundaries very significantly. The Germans forced the Russians to cede large areas and allow other areas to be self-determining, become free will. What you see here is a red area, which is largely the Baltic countries that we know about, which the Germans thought they would take over themselves. Includes Warsaw. They didn't have any Poles in the mix. They just assumed that would become Germany, with German princelings on the throne. But the rest of the land through there was able to be self-determined, and the Germans in fact invaded all the way down Ukraine. So Ukrainia, as it's called on that map, became an independent entity, more or less. That was forced by the Germans on the Russians, obviously. The treaty included, however, from the point of view of this talk, the Bolsheviks were expected to cede the provinces of Kars in Turkey and Batumi in the Ottoman Empire. In other words, Batumi that I pointed out at the end of that railway line, western end of that railway line, was at that point part of the Ottoman Empire. So that's the setting. The Allies feared that Germany would continue its advance in the east. It would capture important resources like that oil we talked about at Batumi, particularly food in Eastern Europe, and it had ideas of developing Asia Minor and heading towards India. The other big risk for the Allies was the capacity to reinforce the Western Front. Before most of these events happened, the Germans, sensing that the Russians were giving in, had already transferred 40 divisions to the Western Front. And then between 1917 and 21 March 1918, they'd increased their fighting strength on the Western Front by 30%, whereas the Allies had dropped by 25%. That's due to attrition of the numbers, if you count divisions. That attack went in, as you know, and it's the period where Haig issues his well-known order of the day declaring, with our backs to the wall, we have to fight. So it was a very critical time. Furthermore, the Allies had in stores, military stores, supplied Russia for many years, and they were on the docks in Archangel, Murmansk, and over in Siberia at Vladivostok. So the Allies decided they would have to intervene. Skip some bits now. Otherwise it gets dreadfully complicated. The Russian Civil War began. The Allies decided that they would intervene in North Russia. They compiled a multinational military expedition in 1918. Now it was multinational, but it wasn't under a single commander, so it wasn't a combined operation as we would now recognise that. There wasn't one single commander, so there would be substantial contingents. Its goals were to help the Czechoslovak Legion. Now, that's a group of 50 or 60,000 men operating in support of the Tsarist Russians. Now it wants to go back, say loyal to the Western Allies, and wants to go back and fight on the Western Front. Its goal is Czechoslovakia, which, as you would probably recall, came into being in 1919. It's about 70,000 men. Of course, in the Soviet era in Eastern Europe, they were disregarded because they were on the wrong side. Now, in Czechoslovakia, their war memorials are erected. They're revered as fighters for the independence of Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic that it's become. So the Allies were trying to get the Czechoslovak Legion out via Siberia and cordon off those stores in the ports. So an Allied expeditionary force, which included some Australian volunteers, landed in Murmansk, the top of Russia, in March 1918 to support the weakening Russian front. In December 1918, the Allies had 14,000 personnel at Murmansk and 16,000 at Archangel. The total force in those two places in North Russia never exceeded greater than 35,000. They hoped they were going to foment a white Russian support, and therefore they would restore their military force to another little aspect of Australian involvement that played for the Navy. The Royal Australian Navy took a part in these operations. As you've seen, the bottom end of where the Don River comes in to the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea was largely in the hands of White Russians. In these cases, these were Don Cossacks, they were called, based on the river Don. Cossacks, I discovered, some of you probably know this, so I didn't know this, were actually not domiciled in particular villages. That was a distinguishing feature, and they were very good horsemen, they still are. But the basis of Soviet control was in the villages, you see, and Tsarist control. And so the Cossacks were a bit unreliable. Nevertheless, they were fighting against the Soviets, and they're in this area here. So the Navy was tasked with sending HMAS Swan, a small destroyer, named after the West Australian River, no doubt, because only small destroyers could go through the Straits of Kerch. Now, if you're watching TV last night, and you may have seen a Russian tanker blocking the Straits of Kerch, where there's now a bridge. And, of course, Crimea is a disputed country because Putin took it back from Ukraine across the river. And East Ukraine is this area over here, the Don Basin, where there was all the trouble. So the Navy sails up the river. There's a battalion of bricks on the ground there, the 7th Battalion of the Royal Berkshire Regiment, where it's said that Australians commanded two of its companies. Well, I couldn't substantiate that. I couldn't find it anywhere on the web, but then I've seen it by Geoffrey Gray, a distinguished, now late historian. So there were two Australian company commanders there, as it turns out, commanding a British regiment from one of the better counties of England. They were there as a reconnaissance mission, in effect. So the commander on the ship and a group of hundreds Australian sailors disembarked at Rostov. They explored this area here and over there to that place with a modern name. And they, I gather, didn't think much of the chances and of an organised resistance. So they withdrew, ship sailed back, went to England and finally came home. But the Navy at least took a part in it. And they travelled about 500 km on the ground on this reconnaissance. So they did a substantial amount of work. And the Bolsheviks suddenly broke through, so they left. In the current world, the uprising in Ukraine and the aftermath of 2014 still goes on. One of the cities they visited is in the Donetsk Basin, Mariupol, which is close to the border. There were skirmishes all through Ukraine in that period, and MH17 was shot down over that area. By now, one of the cities they visited, I was close to the islands, actually this one, is a city, the 16th largest city in Russia. There's 1 million people there. Some of these places, we might think of as villages, are actually big cities. That's the North Russian intervention. Now the more interesting one, from an Australian point of view, I think, is an episode down in the Trans-Caucasus. Let's go back one down there. The Trans-Caucasus. Until the summer of 1917, the Russians owned the area, if you will, between Baghdad, down on the plains of Iraq, below this map, across to the Caspian Sea. That was more or less the border. There is a road there through the town of Hamadan, which links the plains of Baghdad, the Nineveh plains in that area, and the Black Sea. I understand at the moment Black Sea swimming resorts are heavily used by well-to-do Iraqis able to drive that road in their forward drive vehicles. It's about 1,000 kilometres wide. But it constituted a very substantial gap for reasons I gave earlier. The British were worried that the Bolsheviks or the Germans would penetrate through to India. In the region there was widespread famine. It began to devastate the populations in 1917. Crops withered, imported foodstuffs were unattainable because the military had taken up all the transportation in the entire region, and so they couldn't buy in food. The Allies, for reasons unclear, refused to pay for oil, so they weren't generating any revenue in Persia. And roughly one half, I think that's 9 to 11 million Persians, or Iranians if you will, died of starvation in that period. It's a little footnote to the war. Oh, by the way, roughly 10 million. Extraordinary numbers. Naturally, the men fit enough to fight didn't think the British were a very good idea at all. So, one of those amazing British Imperial officers called Lieutenant General Dunsterville was tasked with filling this roughly 1,000-kilometre gap somehow, but told he had no forces to do it other than about 1,000 people. And they were picked men from most of the British Commonwealth and Britain, and hired on the Western Front. Brigade commanders were told to hand over about up to a dozen really talented, flexibly minded, excellent soldiers for a secret operation. And a few people bought this, amongst whom was a chap named Captain Savage. Captain Savage had a military cross. He had been the acting as brigade major on the Western Front. His first name was Stanley, and we know him later as Lieutenant General Stanley, who commanded in the Islands Pacific at the end of the war. It was said of Stanley by one of the staff corps officers in the very late 1930s that he wasn't any good. He didn't know how to maneuver troops. He was really only a mate of blankies. I don't think that's true. And you'll see here an example of when he was a captain, only 20 years earlier, when he was a captain, sort of things he did. Anyway, Dunsterville is given this particular task. He has got hardly anybody to do it with. He's got a 1,000-kilometre gap to cover across here, roughly, and somehow he's got to stop the possibility of the Ottomans or the Germans cutting through there. It appeared to him that highly mobile and trained special forces might be the alternative. They could then encourage local establishing all the levies, but local troops to join up and give them some numbers. That was the idea. They were to move from Baghdad across this road, which was pretty rugged. It was surrounded by Kurdish guerrillas and local tribesmen, and was definitely an unsafe route. Dunstable needed it because it was the only way he could get across, and his actual target with the main force was the oil well over here at Baku. The Russians having just withdrawn from that area. So he had to move his forces across there, and he needed a secure line of communication crossways from Baghdad to the coast of the Black Sea. Part of his force, therefore, was assigned as rear security, if you want to put it that way, but also given a task of regional control to the north of the road. Now, they did this in a way that people who served in either Malaya or Vietnam would understand as counter-revolutionary warfare. They went out to a village, they threw out known hostiles, they restored local government, they set the police up, they tried to get a force of irregulars or locals, and then they patrolled around the area, and they had to draw maps, and they pacified the region. They also paid the locals with good British money to build the roads, so they eventually built road networks around these patrol bases, and gradually were extending their coverage of the region. That's what they were setting out to do. Dunstable was on his way, and he was stalled by the locals, couldn't get right across. When the Germans crossed the Black Sea and landed on the western end of the oil pipeline at Batumi. So he knows the Germans are there. They're about 700 kilometres from his objective. The Ottomans are heading for the objective. The Ottomans and the Germans are supposed to be allies, but on this issue they were rivals. The Germans wanted it more, I think, than the Ottomans wanted it. And so there was sort of a race to this place, which didn't work out. Dunstable got there. He tried to raise local fighters. He got enmeshed in a dispute between Assyrians and Armenians, and the defence was not a success. And so he had to withdraw, and at that point it looked as though that oil link across the Caucasus had fallen into enemy hands. However, the Western Armistice comes into it. On October the 21st of 1918, the Germans were given to understand that the war was over on the Western Front and they should come home. And they finally got home in 1919, the last German troops to do so. But turning now to Stan Savage, he started off doing area pacification. He had 15 Australians and New Zealanders on Canadian, and he had to raise local forces and do this area pacification task. He started off doing that. Midway through that process, he was told that 160 kilometres to the north, he was to take on a new mission, which was help a mixed force of Assyrians and Armenians to defend their town of Urmia further up. And Urmia is just in here. So he's got to go 160 kilometres through nasty country. He's given 2 squadrons of cavalry, and he's 15 blokes, and he's told to get on with it. He will meet the other guys on the way, and then they'll be taken into Urmia and they'll defend it. Off they go on the 18th of May 1918. On the way there, they find that they're been somewhat trumped in all this. There's been a breakout, and coming down the road towards them are the erstwhile commanders and defenders of Urmia, followed by tens of thousands of refugees. They are being pursued by Kurds and Ottoman troops. The ethnic hatreds and diversity in this area are quite tricky, and I'm trying not to sort of take sides because there's all these people fighting each other, but they were certainly causing a serious refugee crisis. So all of a sudden Stan Savage is given a job in July 1918 that involves trying to save up to 70,000. He claims it was only 60, but my heavens, with 15 Australians and doubtful other support, and get them 160 on foot, 160 kilometres back to safety. They did it by the 15 Australians with Lewis guns on horseback, holding ridges and hills. As soon as the oncoming Ottomans or Turks got within firing range, which was 600 metres, although the Armenians would have preferred 1,000 metres because it made them feel safer. It doesn't work as well. They would fire their Lewis guns at the oncoming troops and then off they go to the next point back. While they're holding off this force, the groups of refugees are trekking along the road in appalling circumstances. They were detailing them. You've seen that sort of stuff all over the world. Anyway, he succeeded. Got them all back. Got them back to the road to Baghdad, where they were picked up by trucks. They were taken down into Iraq, modern Iraq, and settled on the plains down there. A big military hospital was set up to establish care for them by the British. And the allegation that Captain Savage didn't know how to handle troops or manoeuvre them strikes me as a little bit astray. For this, he was awarded a DSO, not a common decoration at all for a captain at the time, if not still. So the British lost Baku. They, however, rescued a great number of refugees, Armenians and Assyrians. The Assyrians, quite a number of them came to Australia. Some of this material is on their website. They revere Savage. He's on the website. He's almost like one of the holy saints of the Assyrians. They're a very to Christianity. And they live out in Western Sydney. It's quite a good. Anyway, on September the 15th, 2018, just 3-4 months ago, the 100th anniversary of the liberation of Baku, not by the British, by the Ottomans, was celebrated. An Armenian and Bolshevik forces meeting in Azerbaijan with President Recep Erdogan and the Azerbaijani president, with all sorts of troops and Turkish armed forces, and they dedicated a memorial to 100 years ago, so they still remember it over there. Okay, summary. It's fashionable to call these things a sideshow, but I don't know that saving 60 or 70,000 people is just a sideshow. Secondly, strategically, they were closing a gap that had opened on the British right, if you like, outside Iraq in Persia. And thirdly, it's still very modern. Most of the fighting in that area is still going on. Kurdistan is not a place. It's a region with a degree of autonomy in Iraq, with rather fluid boundaries, and people are scattered all over the place. I think that little Australian escapade in the hands of later Lieutenant General Savage is one of the finer examples of Australian initiative we like to think is typical, and I'm very proud of it. Thank you.